All right, I thought we'd take a look at the internet weather for this week, Manny. And this is the most probe ports where we've seen the most scanning activity. Nothing surprising that we haven't really covered before. 8545 might not be familiar to people. That's the Ethereum wallet. There's a vulnerability there. So there's still a few actors out there aggressively scanning for it. The other ones that are kind of notable maybe are 21 and 20. They both kind of came up, especially 20. They're related to FTP. 20 TCP is the control channel port for FTP. It's not a lot of sources involved in the activity. I didn't take a really deep dive into it, but it's not botnet related specifically that I could see. You know, some certain actors out there looking for open FTP servers, things of that nature. So on this slide, we have, these are the ones that are doing most of the scanning, 5431 TCP. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's a bit of a mystery. We'll take a closer look at it. FTP's in here again, SSH is in here. 81 TCP, I actually do have a slide for this one, so we'll talk about that. And then 5555 TCP is in here again. This one's been up for the past maybe 3 or 4 weeks or so now. We'll tell you why. So 5431 TCP, I feel like this one, the more I looked into it, the more confused I got. There's about 90,000 scan sips per hour. Is where it's peaking out at around, but they're very short spikes of activity for maybe an hour or two, where all 90,000, they like scan this port 5431 and then they stop, which is not, botnets typically don't work like that. The other thing I noticed is that there's probably about a 3 or 4 day cycle here that they seem to repeat, but these brief spurts and stops is not typically what we see with botnet stuff. Usually they start and then they decay over a little bit longer period of time. It's not usually this precise in terms of spiking like that. It's possibly related to a Broadcom universal plug-and-play format string exploit that was kind of discovered maybe a year or 2 ago. I checked our honeypots. I have no scan probes against me for this port, so I'm hoping maybe I'll catch them to see what they're trying to do. The other thing I thought was really interesting when I actually looked at the flow traffic is that while they're scanning port 5431, they're fixing their source port to be port 6, which is really weird. And you can see when I look at TCP source port 6, this is a packet count, it lines up almost exactly with this activity and when it occurs. And I can see that in the flow traffic. So don't really have an explanation for that. So I think it needs more investigation. I don't know if it's malicious or legitimate or what it is, but it's new. We hadn't seen it, prior to about a month ago, and now we do, and I'd like to understand what is this about, why is this happening? So when I looked at a bunch of these sources, I kind of did it's a lot of them, so it's 90,000 some sources. Many of them, I would say most actually, have this port 4567 open, which is a TR69 port, which is for remote management. A lot of them also, but not all of them, have on port 80 this micro HTTPD service running on it, announcing itself as broadband router. So I don't know what to make of that all yet, but you can see it's almost basically the entire world of where people use the internet. So it's it's interesting. I'm not sure what to make of it. We'll follow up on it, but it's number 3 in terms of the top scan sources. So I thought we should probably try to figure out what's going on here.
A mystery right now as to what it may be, and hopefully John, as he mentioned, might be able to capture some of these packets in the honeypots. And if we can capture some of the traffic on those honeypots, we might be able to figure out what it is that this traffic is actually telling us.
So the next one that I want to look at real quickly is port 81 TCP. I'm actually showing a 120-day chart for this one. 81 TCP kind of came into the consciousness sometime last year because there was a remote code execution exploit against the Go-Ahead web server, which is a really popular web server. It's a little tight web server that they install on a lot of these IoT devices. So somebody found a remote code execution exploit against that, which allows you to basically do whatever you want on the device. So people have been installing malware. We've seen kind of little decays. There's a drop, but then it came back and it kind of stayed steady. We've seen some spikes. There's a lot of activity there scanning for that. And I'm going to guess most of it is related to actors or malware, botnets, seeking out more devices, listening on that, probably for Go-Ahead web server or other similar types of alternative HTTP web services running on that port. And then the last one I have here is port 5555 TCP. We've talked about this on the show. So somebody discovered that there are a bunch of devices out there with this port open and listening. And this is actually the Android debugger service. They found about 6,500 devices out there. We're able to compromise them. And since then, they've been scanning this port quite a bit, trying to find more of themselves to recruit into their botnet. It's more than just phones. Phones are impacted, but more so it's probably other types of Android-based IoT things. You know, there's a lot of these little set-top boxes and other types of devices that run Android as their core OS.
Yep.
And they could potentially be exposed if they're directly connected to the internet. So that's all we had for this week.